Enough to start. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Santa Clara City Council to order. Confirmation of a quorum, or do we even have that on here? We don't even have that. Confirmation of a quorum?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, confirming quorum.
Okay, thank you. We have one item for closed session, City Attorney.
Very good. Thanks, Mayor. I'll read us in. It's a conference with labor negotiators with the city representatives as designated on the agenda. The employee organization under discussion is Engineers Group, Unit Number 4.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to adjourn to closed session. We'll be back here at 6:30 p.m. Oh, I'm sorry. Members of the public. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak? I still feel like it's last night, so. All right, thank you. We're going to adjourn to closed session and be back at 6:30. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to get this special meeting called to order. Appreciate it. I think we need to start first with our Pledge of Allegiance and our Statement of Values. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interest of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Chahal. Roll call, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Shahal.
Present.
Councilmember Hardy.
Present.
Councilmember Park. Councilmember Jane.
Here.
Let the record reflect that Vice Mayor Cox will not be present this evening, and Mayor Gilmore is in the building and will be joining us shortly.
Do we need a motion to excuse? I'll make the motion to excuse Vice Mayor Cox.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Do I have any comment from the council? Any public comment on that? Okay, then we will vote.
Actually, I have one comment. So this is a special meeting. I've noted that special meetings in the past where our council members have been absent, we didn't always vote to excuse. I remember, at least one time in recent memory where this has happened. I'd like to know what the policy is on excusing council members from a special meeting versus a regular meeting.
Council, I'll
Yeah,
let you
I don't know the
that.
answer to that, but I can get back to you.
Understood. Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Councilmember Jane,
think
did
we
you have a
have-
question?
Yeah, I think we have in our charter or policy that if you miss so many meetings, then I guess you're subject to removal or something. But does that include special meetings? That's what I want to know.
I guess that's also the root of my question as well.
Yeah, that's part of it, and I think what you're saying is right. Member Chahal, there is some provision to that effect. I just don't know the answer to it and how special meetings are considered or not, as part of that mandatory obligation to attend a certain amount. So I'll take a look at that and send that information item back to the full council so everybody has the same advice.
Thank you. Appreciate council's help with that. And we will, should I vote over here or here? Yeah. Everyone could register their vote. Thank you. That passes 5-0 with those in attendance. Appreciate that. All right. For today's meeting, the council is in person and conducting its meeting in a hybrid manner. The public is welcome to attend in person, and the city continues to use the Zoom feature to allow participation from the safety of your home or your office. Members of the public can still join via the link or call into the Zoom meeting phone number shown on the screen now. Thank you so much. If you would like to speak on an agenda item or during public presentations, please raise your hand on the Zoom application or press *9 on your phone. Please only raise your hand while the item you're seeking to speak on is presented. Staff will enter your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number, and I will call on you to speak. As a friendly reminder, members of the public have 2 minutes to speak on an agenda item and 3 minutes on public presentation. That's reserved for topics not on the agenda. Prior to each agenda item, staff will lower your hand to ensure members of the public are speaking on the appropriate item. Okay, we'll move on to the agenda. We'll start with reports of action taken in closed session. Council.
Thank you, Member Hardy. Council did meet in closed session on the item listed, conference with labor negotiators with respect to employee organization, the engineers of the City of Santa Clara, Unit Number 4. There is no reportable action. However, this item is on tonight's agenda for council action.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to is it item number 2? It's just such a strange agenda, right? I'm looking for the regular things that I'm used to seeing. All right, item number 2, authorize the city manager to execute the 2025 to 2029 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Santa Clara and the engineers of the City of Santa Clara Unit 4 that incorporates the terms of the parties' mediation joint recommendation on terms for a successor Memorandum of Understanding and adoption of a resolution to update the classified salary plan for classifications represented by Unit 4. We go to motion. Do you have a presentation, City Manager? Okay.
This item is actually on consent. It's part of the consent calendar for this meeting.
The only consent
The only
calendar?
item on consent.
What? It's there, but it's not on here.
Oh, it's on our agenda. It's at the bottom of page 2. Sorry.
Where? What am I looking at then?
Consent, yeah, it's a widow.
What meeting thing am I looking at? Look at that.
I'll give you my agenda.
Thank you. It doesn't say. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I have an interesting one over here. Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Motion by Councilmember Gonzalez, second by Councilmember Chahal. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, when you're ready, Assistant City Clerk. Please register your vote. And that passes 6-0 with those present. Thank you. Item number 3A, actions on award of public works contract for the Central Park New Entrance Access and Parking Improvements Project to Guerra Construction Group, Inc. Amendment number 3 to the agreement with Nuvis Landscape Architecture, Inc. for design professional services for the Central Park New Entrance Access and Parking Improvements Project and related budget amendments. City Manager.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Javon Grogan, City Manager. As the title indicates, this project is much needed improvements to our beloved Central Park. The project will construct a new signalized entrance to Central Park from Kiley Boulevard and Kaiser Drive, as well as expanded parking areas, an accessible drop-off area, improved pathways, and also pavement rehabilitation and accessibility improvements to the pavilion parking lot. This project also may impact the city's ability to host the 4th of July celebration at Central Park next year. And so the core presentation will be presented by Public Works Director Craig Mobeck. He will provide background on the project and information related to the estimated construction schedule and project phasing. And then we'll also have the Park and Recreation Director, Damon Sparacino, come just to talk a little bit about what those impacts may be. And of course, you will make that decision later next year. But just want to be very transparent. Launching this project may very well have an impact on the ability to host 4th of July here. As you know, we've hosted it at Mission College for several years, and there are many options abound. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Public Works Director Craig Mobeck.
Thank you very much, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Craig Mobeck, Director of Public Works. And so tonight I'm here to talk about the award of this construction project, and I'll go through some of the background. We'll talk project includes, and then we'll talk a little bit about bid results and phasing, and then we'll go through recommendations. And then prior to any action, as the city manager mentioned, I will invite Director Damon Sparacino up to talk a little bit more about 4th of July events. So this project started several years ago. Typical to most parks projects, goes through a schematic design process, involves the public, the Parks and Rec Commission, and ultimately comes up through City Council to get approval on the schematic. This project followed that path, and then once the schematic design was approved, then we were able to go award a consultant design contract to begin design. So we started down that path, and as we got through some of the design process, there was a resident who filed a potential claim against the city associated with the pavilion parking, and that was really related to some of the ADA improvements. The pavilion parking lot is shown in the Central Park Master Plan at a later date. It was not originally supposed to be part of this project before you tonight. However, based on that settlement agreement and discussions with Parks, Public Works, and the City Attorney's Office, it was determined that the quickest way to meet that settlement agreement and deliver the pavilion parking improvements was to incorporate it into the access and entrance improvement project. Created a little bit bigger project, but then we'd be able to deliver it without going out through a separate process. So we paused, the design came back to council, ultimately got those approvals to incorporate the pavilion parking area, and then we moved forward with the project. So in terms of the scope of the project, two distinct areas. So the pavilion parking area, it's basically a parking lot rehabilitation, ADA improvements, new paving and accessible walkways and lighting, and I'll go through some schematics of that on the next slide. And then the new entrance, access, and parking area associated with Central Park, that's located Kaiser Drive at Kiley, goes through an installation of a new portion of the signal. As you know, that's a T intersection. This would install a new leg of the signal to signalize the entrance and exit of Central Park. But I will go through some of those layouts now. So before you is a overview of the pavilion parking lot. So you can see that in the bottom left portion of the screen. So this shows what those improvements will be. So we'll go through a complete new paving. As you know, that's an aged parking lot in need of a lot of repair. We'll complete ADA accessible parking stalls, lighting. You see the associated walkway improvements as well that meander up towards the pavilion parking area. And then the storm drain will be required to flow into the swales, what we call C3, to receive some treatment before it enters the storm drain system. This next slide shows the new entrance and access and parking improvements. So you see down at the bottom right is the Kiley Kaiser Drive intersection. And so we'll be adding a new piece of the signal along the Central Park access. This is entirely new construction, so we'll be building new access. And you can see to the right that center turnaround. So that will be pick up and drop off, really to serve the Magical Bridge predominantly. And then the parking lot extends towards the community recreation center. We'll have about 31 new parking stalls, ADA parking. There'll be electrical vehicle charging, new landscaping, as well as this will incorporate new walkways to enter Magical Bridge, to enter Central Park, as well as the Veterans Memorial. So in terms of bid results, the design was completed, the big bid package was prepared. That goes through our standard process of advertising. then allowing a period of time to have contractors prepare their bids. They were submitted in October, and we received a number of bids for this project, which was great, and some of them were below the engineer's estimate, which was even better. So about 10 bids ranging from $5.6 million all the way up to $7.3 million. The engineer's estimate for the project was $6.7 million, and the lowest responsible bid submitted by Guerra Construction was about 16% below that engineer's estimate at roughly $5.66 million. So before I go into some of the recommendations, let's talk about phasing. So this project was put together and designed into 2 unique phases. And as you see on this portion of the slide to your right is an overview of both phases of the project. So the lower Phase 1 project is the pavilion parking lot improvement portion. And then the Phase 2 project is the new access and entrance. And you can see in the middle of your screen is where Phase 1 and Phase 2 meets. And so the predominant reasons for setting up into phases, one is we did not want to shut off the Magical Bridge playground, right? So we can construct Phase 1, you can access the Magical Bridge through that Phase 2 area. And then once we complete Phase 1 and open it up, then you can access Magical Bridge through Phase 1 while we're working on Phase 2. The other reason for setting it up this way was because I had mentioned the settlement agreement, and the city was required to deliver that portion of the project as quickly as we could. So allowing this to take place, we can complete that settlement portion of the project first. And then also, while we're building Phase 1, Phase 2 has longer lead time items associated with the traffic signal, the controller, and the mast arms. So it allows the procurement of that to take place while we're able to build the portions of Phase 1. So the overall duration of the project is anticipated to be beginning in the early part of 2026 and then extending through fall of 2027. And in the next couple slides, I'll talk a little bit more about the phasing, and we'll focus in a little bit more so you can see that in an aerial. And so the left side of the screen shows the Phase 1. As I mentioned, the pavilion parking would be closed off during this phase, as well as the walkways that lead to the pavilion area, some of the walkways that go into the park, as well as Magical Bridge. Once that phase is completed and then the city is accepted it, then the contractor would be allowed to open up the Phase 1 and move over to Phase 2. During Phase 2, that portion of the park would be closed off. So you see the predominant area where the new entrance will be, new parking lot, as well as there's a pathway leading into Magical Bridge. So in talking with our contractor in terms of when they felt Phase 1 could be completed, they're anticipating if they start in the early part of the year that Phase 1 could take up to the early part of the summer. And then once that's completed, they'd roll into Phase 2. Obviously, there's a lot of things that tie into completion dates, such as weather, rain days, and how many days are open for construction. And that, obviously, we'll see how it plays out in February through summertime. So in terms of the recommendation, there's a few recommendations in front of you. The first is associated with CEQA, so asking the council to make a determination for the project being exempt from CEQA. Recommendation number 2 is awarding to the project to the lowest responsible bidder, Guerra Construction, in the amount of approximately $5.6 million, and authorizing the city manager to execute all the documents associated with the construction award, completion, and acceptance. Recommendation number 3 would be the authorization for the city manager to execute change orders up to 15%, just under $850,000. Number 4 would be approving and authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment with Nuvis landscape architecture for the project, and that's associated with some of the items that we incorporated into the project. And so there's a little bit of additional money with the submittal phase and the construction phase and the post-construction phase. So just under $63,000 amendment with that. And then lastly, number 5, and so that's a budget amendment. So that's recognizing approximately $335,000 from the SVP Greenhouse Gas Fund. So that's utilized for the electrical vehicle charging stations. And then there's some transfer of money with the Mitigation Fee Act, roughly about $20,000. So there's an overall budget amendment totaling $355,300. So that concludes what, my portion of the presentation and the recommendations. And I'll invite Director Damon Sparacino to come up, and then he'll talk a little bit more about events and 4th of July, and then how those could be handled during construction of this project.
So we had a brief presentation that we also loaded into the, possibly, yeah. And before we get there, just thank you to Director Mobeck for the great work for his team, and also the lead-in on this. We'll wait for the slides to come up. Perfect, thank you. Yeah. So just as an aside tonight, we wanted to present council with a couple of considerations relative to hosting, or the potential of hosting, 2026 July 4th celebration at Central Park. So historically, the city of Santa Clara hosted 4th of July, all-city picnic and fireworks celebrations at Central Park. However, due to budget constraints in fiscal year 21-22, $360,000 in general fund support of special events was cut from the Parks and Recreation Department's budget, and the fireworks portion of the 4th of July celebration was eliminated at that time. In 2022 and 2023, the city offered the 4th of July all-city picnic without fireworks at Central Park. And as everybody, including council, knows, in 24 and 25, the city hosted the 4th of July celebration again, including fireworks, at and in partnership with Mission College. Oh, geez, it jumped on me. Excuse me. So the city is considering hosting the 2026 4th of July celebration, which will include fireworks again at Central Park, and is actively working with internal departments and community stakeholders regarding the feasibility of this endeavor. It's important to note tonight a couple of considerations, some of which you heard prior to me coming up from Director Mobeck, are projects that are happening at Central Park, and not only the entrance project, but an access project, phases 1 and 2, but we also have the International Swim Center project, phase 1, that was approved by council, which seems like many moons ago, but it was last week. I have some illustrations of what the project area and laydown of that would look like. We also, as mentioned, have the Central Park East entrance and access point, west. And then the other thing to note is, since the last time we hosted 4th of July at Central Park with fireworks, the Santa Clara School District has put a fence up at Central Park Elementary School. However, through discussions with the school district, there's ways for us to mitigate that fence issue. We just have to work through those with, between now and the 4th of July. Additionally, as discussed last year prior to the 4th of July being held at Mission College, staff and as well as the police chief, the police chief came up and presented on a few public safety concerns, many of which are traffic congestion and pedestrian safety, emergency vehicle access in and out of the zone, crowd control in general, and then having a secure perimeter. So we didn't have an image like this during our International Swim Center report last week for consideration. But we asked staff in the engineering, city engineering area under Public Works to help us kind of map out what the actual laydown will be for when we execute the phase 1 of the project. And of course, this is the area that we endeavor or hope to stay within, but there could be, and we'll do our best, obviously, to work with the construction companies. But as you can see, it'll go out a little bit into the walkways at both the north and south end, and very rarely take up a row of parking, which, depending on what our fallout zone and our launch point is for the 4th of July, may end up being impacted anyway. So just bringing as much information before you as I can. Next slide. Director Mobeck had this up as part of the overall project presentation, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but we just wanted to make sure that council, that when thinking of and talking about the 4th of July, that council looked a little bit more closely at this so that they understood the potential impacts. And namely, if you look up in the phase 2 zone of the map, that's where historically we've had one of our main stages for the 4th of July. And we're, depending on the timing of everything, whether we thread the needle or it hits within the 4th of July between phase 1 or phase 2, staff will need to work through finding an alternative location within Central Park to host a stage. But we just wanted to make sure you as council knew that it wouldn't necessarily be business as usual given the different projects that were happening in Central Park. So lastly, I just wanted to close that staff will return, as mentioned by City Manager Grogan, early next year with an item for City Council consideration outlining a proposed scope, budget, and logistic plan for hosting the 2026 4th of July celebration at Central Park, and of course, commemorating the 250th anniversary of the United States Declaration of Independence. And before we move to either questions on 4th of July or the access and entrance project, I just wanted to close by saying staff believes we can still deliver a 4th of July celebration at Central Park. We just wanted to fully inform council of the impacts that we'll be dealing with, and that we, of course, will do our best to deliver a premier event for the community of Santa Clara. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, question, is that it for the presentation? City Manager? Is that it for the presentation?
Yes, that's it for the presentation. Again, we're not asking for any decision on Central Park, but did just want to alert you, July 4th, just wanted to alert you of the potential conflicts and issues as you award this contract or consider the award of this contract. And certainly we can look at alternatives for where the 4th of July celebration is hosted when we get to that, if the impacts of this construction project and the other things that will be happening at Central Park in 2026 are too great.
All right, questions. Councilmember Jane, followed by Hardy.
Presumably, 4th of July is being considered at Central Park because Mission College is inside the FIFA zone. But my question is, won't Great America be open at that time anyway and to be doing their fireworks?
You want to do them all at once?
Questions.
And
Ask
so
all
I
the
have
questions.
more questions. Can you go to slide 8? So here on phase 2, exactly where will the parking be? It's not going to fill that whole area for parking because that'll get rid of the Veterans Memorial and everything. Wasn't clear. The entrance, there is at Kaiser Drive, but then where will the cars actually park? And how much of that area will be used up? There's a big grassy field there. And then my last question is, I know we're upgrading the pavilion parking lot. As I go there for art and wine and everything, I find that there's a shortage of bike racks. And did you consider, as you're looking at upgrading all this parking for cars, what the opportunities are to add, say, bike racks where the play area is near the pavilion parking lot and near the pavilion itself and elsewhere in the park? So those are my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. I would like to understand completely this Phase 1, Phase 2 timeframe, because it looks like Phase 1 will be over the time of the Art and Wine Festival, and that's a major parking and access point for me, well, for all of us, for that. I would agree that I also was worried about bikes, because that was probably my one big point last year up at Mission College, is no one had anywhere to park bikes, and it became kind of an issue. It was much farther in, it was harder to find, and our security wasn't letting them in. So this is also my worry with Central Park, is if we go back to there, and we've always had the picnic there, but the fireworks did not start being at Central Park until 2002. That was for our sesquicentennial, when we were 150. And that's when that started, because before that, it was always out at Great America. And I know that because when I lived out there, we used to sit on my front porch and watch them and handle all the traffic as well. So that's when we moved it there. So we talk about it being the 250th birthday party for the United States in 2026. Well, our 175th birthday is 2027. And when I'm looking at what you said for Phase 2, is that wouldn't be done until the fall. And so that tells me July 5th is our city's birthday. And that sounds like that would be an issue as well. So I want to understand the timeframes. I do know the person that did this, that this settlement, they were part of the BPAC. And so I'm very aware of the settlement and what happened and why. And I understand putting the two together and doing it in phases, it makes sense. But I want to make certain I can feel comfortable that we're still able to have either what we want to in Central Park, or that we have an alternative that's more than acceptable. Thank you.
Councilmember Park.
Yeah. So I actually defer to Councilmember Hardy on all things historic. So now I have those concerns too, but I'll let you address those separately. When we talk about phase 2, I see that there's a lot of material that's being moved. There's the Eric Kesterson Memorial. There's the exercise equipment in front of the Magical Bridge Playground. I'm sure these would all be moved. Where would they be moved to? We also have the Christmas tree. I believe that's the lit Christmas tree that was there before the second Christmas tree that we put up this year. I'm concerned about that big tree. And would staff parking still be where it is, or would we make a change to that? I mean, in reality, I understand the desire to align with Kaiser Drive because it's a driveway. We've got an intersection there, but why couldn't we have an access way north of Kaiser connecting with the existing staff parking lot for pickup and drop off, and then leave most of the park area intact? Like, I'm really concerned that we're taking away a lot of park space for essentially driveway and walkway, when I feel that that area works really well by itself. I don't like removing green space. I don't like removing space for people to put in roads or parking structures. So that's a really big question for me. Near the pavilion parking in Phase 1, I know that, I've seen a lot of events there. I've seen all the gravel walkway on the north side of the parking lot, and I've seen people, struggle. I've seen strollers tip over because they're on that gravel parking lot. And I'm sure we're going to repave that, make it really smooth, and make sure that the way for people bringing equipment especially is obvious and very nice for the people that need it. But I've just seen people struggle in last years. Like every time I see something like this, I try to offer to help out. But it's just a really bad area. I'm glad we're making it nice, but I also like to look at the actual uses and addressing the problems that we know we have in addition to making it look nicer. But again, my first question about Phase 2 is, I understand we want to align with Kaiser, but do we have to remove so much parkland? Do we have to remove all these different things, the Kesterson Memorial, the exercise equipment, the trees, for basically a pick-up and drop-off zone, which I feel we could do slightly north of Kaiser Drive? May not be as convenient, but it would leave us with more parkland intact. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Jane?
I kind of always ask this question. Have we considered, as we're adding this parking, looking at solar on top of the parking lots?
Is that it? Yep. Right. I like the plan. I think it's good. I think these improvements are really going to help Central Park, especially the parking lot in the pavilion. That's been disastrous for so many years, so it'll be nice to get that fixed. I'm still pushing for the 4th of July celebration at Central Park, and that's really based on the number of residents I've spoken to. Said they appreciate it's at Mission College, but most of our residents love it at Central Park. I think we should do a survey of our residents to see where they want that, whether they want it at Central Park or they're happy with Mission College. Because for me, when I'm out at Mission College, it's very much a regional event that we're hosting in Santa Clara. It's one of the few events that are taking place now, and it's attractive for Milpitas and San Jose and Sunnyvale. And the Santa Clarans that fight the traffic to get out there. And I don't know if Great America is going to be operating at the point where they're going to have fireworks on 4th of July. I don't know if that's been confirmed or not. So I'd like to see what our residents think, because I am approached with this a lot, that they loved it when it was here at Central Park. So I know that I've already talked to the police chief. He said he was okay with it. Talking to the school district, they said they could work something out as long as we clean up after. This has just been this Central Park's the heart and soul of our community. And it sounds like there is a timeline between Phase 1 and 2. If Phase 1 is on time and finished during the summer, we can hold off on Phase 2 until after the 4th of July. So the timing looks like it might work very well. But I'd like to see what our residents have to say about this. So I certainly would, defer to them. I just can only go by the ones that I talk to that just love it here and miss it here. All right, that's it for the questions.
Thank you, Council. We'll facilitate that. We'll start with Councilmember James' first set of questions. And so Mission College is certainly available next year, as well as Great America. So that is an option available to the city. Great America will be open. They will be hosting their 4th of July fireworks show, and we can continue to partner with them, as well as Mission College has been very excited with the partnership for the last 2 years and have invited us back for a third year. should we desire to do so. Staff began looking at Central Park because at your last conversation, there was significant discussion when the City Council approved Mission College for 2025 in connection with 2026 being the 250th anniversary. There was desires expressed to look at potentially hosting it at Central Park. It is possible. There are certainly challenges and impacts that need to be discussed. And again, that's not agendized for tonight, but we did want to tee that up and have a very transparent conversation with you about the potential impacts of this project as well as other items related to 4th of July. There were a number of questions about the layout and timing of the various phases, and so I'll invite Craig Mobeck to talk about both timing of phase 1 and 2, and the impact on the Art and Wine Festival, as well as the city's birthday, as well as some of the detailed components of phase 2. And then I think the Parks and Rec Director can talk about the reduction of green space. And I know that this design went to the Park and Recreation Commission as well as the council on prior meetings, and so we can talk through that.
Yeah, thank you, City Manager. So starting with Councilmember Jane, there was a question about the Phase 2 and what are the limits. And so here is the schematic of Phase 2, and off to your left, you'll see the Community Recreation Center. And so what you see, the limits, this parking area, how it extends through, and there's a curve, and then it ultimately goes out to Kaiser Drive. So this takes up a significant amount of area. Obviously, there's staging and there's laydown areas. And so when you go back and look at the overview of Phase 2, it's more or less going to take up this area during construction. There was a question about the pavilion parking and the ability to accommodate bike racks. And while I don't think that was part of the original schematic design, I think that's something we can take a look at and work with Parks on to see, what's the best way to accommodate that type of request and install some bike racks. Councilmember Hardy, you had a question about the Art and Wine impacts as well. So looking at the construction, and like I talked about, if things work out the way that we think they may, Phase 1 would be completed prior to the Art and Wine Festival, and then Phase 2 would be being worked on and then would be closed off. And so similar to how when we built Magical Bridge, that extended an Art and Wine, so we would have to accommodate that through a closure. Then there was a question about the construction phasing timeline. So overall, we talked about if we start construction in early 2026, based on the anticipated duration, we would expect that both phases completed by the fall of 2027. Then next, Councilmember Park had a question about the memorial, Kesterson Memorial. And so my understanding is that is going to be ultimately relocated, so it'll still be in that vicinity, but it will be moved. There was a question about the existing exercise equipment. In my understanding, that's not going to be impacted during this construction phase, as well as the Christmas tree that was referenced. There was discussion about the overall design concepts and the space. And ultimately, that originally went through a public process with schematic design, going through the Parks and Rec Commission, and then that schematic ultimately was approved by council, and then that's the schematic that was taken forward as part of the design contract and was approved through council, and so that's what was moved forward with on the design package. Next, question about, from Councilmember Jane regarding solar. So this parking lot project does not accommodate solar, but I think if there's ever improvements out at the CRC, then, you know, that's something that can be looked at to see if there's benefits of adding solar out there, but not part of this project. And then lastly, the mayor, I believe you had a question about the timeline with Phase 1 and Phase 2. Yeah, and, you know, they talk about, you know, when talking with our contractor, and they felt, yeah, it could be early summer. So obviously, there's no teeth to that. There's nothing in the contract, but when we get through that phase, certainly if things align, I think we can have those conversations if we're close to that window and talk about, you know, what that might mean in terms of, you know, Phase 1 and then how we roll into Phase 2 and when. But right now, it's set up that once the Phase 1 is completed and accepted by the city, then we'd roll into Phase 2. But I think that's something we would consider discussing as we got to that time and had a better idea of where we're at. I think those were the Public Works questions. Damon, I'm not sure if there's anything on your side.
Yeah, a couple of other minor questions or housekeeping is the Christmas tree, the historic Christmas tree that has the white,
The old one?
yes. That will not be impacted by the Kaiser Drive placement. We've got bikes. Art and wine, again, was discussed. Staff parking is going to remain where it is. However, it'll, and that parking lot will be tied into. I think one of the questions was how many additional spaces. I think it was mentioned in the report. Is it about 31 additional spaces. Yeah, and then as the city manager mentioned, the Mission College has expressed an interest in working with the city again, should that be the path that is ultimately decided. And if the path is ultimately decided to be Central Park, staff can work through that as well. So I think, unless there's anything else, I think that's good. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Jane. Is your light on from before?
So, you know, we had this discussion earlier when we were looking at the refurbishment of Washington Field. That, you know, there was the idea of maybe getting some lights tennis court lights at the tennis courts nearby at Booksir. You know, one of the issues when you do electrical later is all the trenching work. So if there was a possibility of doing solar later, maybe we could put in the conduit. Presumably, these parking lots will have lights anywhere, any lighting. So there will be electricity and conduit to the lights, just to future-proof it to solar if we wanted to put it there later. Can you tell me how many acres of like green space are being lost to the parking?
While we look for that, I'll also note that this new parking area and roadway leading from Kaiser Drive in major events may also be closed down, and those parking spaces used for vendors. And so having the roadway provides a nice ADA accessible path for the vendor booths, which are right now on grass. And so that was also, I know, part of the consideration for not doing, you know, not looking at an awning area, because during a major event, they will be open and, you know, utilized for the event.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, this is it's not a public hearing, but it should be. So we're going to go to the public. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak? I think we have all staff here. Okay, anyone online? All right, Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just want to say, I think from what I see, it's a great plan. That parking lot there at the pavilion is in dire need of upgrading. So glad to see that it's coming forward and to fruition. And I'd like to make a motion for the recommendation, the staff recommendation.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Gonzalez, second by Councilmember Chahal for staff recommendation. Councilmember Park.
Yeah, so, I mean, I just heard twice that the Christmas tree would not be affected. And I'm taking a look at the roadway plan here on slide 5, and I'm taking a look at where the tree is on the map, and I almost don't see how it couldn't be affected. I think that there's 2 trees, at least, that would arc directly in the path of that intersection. Do we have a list of all the trees that would be affected by this project?
So, yeah, the plans clearly depict the number of trees that'll be removed, as well as all the replanting that'll happen. I don't have the plan set with me to go through that, but yes, there is a counting of removals as well as the plantings.
Okay, but we don't have a number and we don't have the trees.
So we do have a number. It's in the project. So all the portions of the project that have to be completed by the contractors, detailed explicitly in the plans. There's bid items associated with it, and that's how all the contractors were able to prepare their bids. So that's all detailed in the plans and specifications.
Okay, but not here.
All right, Assistant City Clerk. Please register your vote. And that passes 5-1 of those present. Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. We look forward to those improvements. All right, next item, next and last item we have. It's so long, I have to find the beginning of it. Okay. Item 3B, action on fiscal year 24-25 budget year-end report and approval of related budget amendments deferred from December 9th, 2025. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This item tonight is for our fiscal year 24-25 budget, and it includes actions necessary to close out last fiscal year. With higher than expected revenues and departmental expenditure savings, the city ended last fiscal year with excess funds of $41.3 million in the general fund. Each year, the city strives to end the year with extra remaining funds. These additional dollars provide essential one-time resources that are typically used for one-time needs and for filling our rainy day funds, such as our budget stabilization reserve and modest funding for our city infrastructure. The presentation tonight will be provided by our Finance Director, Ken Lee. He will provide a high-level summary of the report and the recommendations that are before you. I'll turn it over to Mr. Lee.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about tonight's item. Tonight's item, as the City Manager mentioned, is a closeout of our fiscal year 24-25 budget. It's a technical document with many, many hundreds of appropriation transactions, closeout of almost 70 city funds, 115 pages. So before I get started, I do want to thank and acknowledge the hard work of our budget team led by our budget manager, Margaret McCann. This product before you is many hours of work by that team. As far as an agenda, I'll provide an overview of why we're here today as it fits into our budget processes. Talk about our general fund performance, and this is a positive report. Happy to report at the end of 24-25 did end the year in a better position in the general fund. I'll detail out very in minute detail, and you'll see it repeatedly, the distribution of those excess dollars, that $41.3 million, and it's the reason why the recommendation language before you is multiple pages long. I'll talk about some of the performance in other funds and then get into the recommended actions. So on this chart here, just I know just for members of the public and to highlight the work of our budget team, a lot of times our budget employees, our analysts are working through 3 different fiscal years. They're closing out the last fiscal year, in this case, fiscal year 24-25. They are monitoring our city budget, and I present at our council meetings monthly financial reports on our current year budget. And then we're working on developing our next biennial budget. And so in this case, in fact, today we had a wrap-up meeting with our department directors on our 2-year capital budget that will be before the council in June of 2026. And so this highlights the reason we're here is when the council does adopt that budget in June, they're based on estimates. You know, the fiscal year that is open at the time we develop that budget. Starts in, you know, late calendar year of the prior year. We refine those estimates in the spring, and then we bring forward a budget based on estimates. And so as we close out a fiscal year, it is necessary to bring forward capital projects, grants, and all of our city funds to true up and reconcile those budgetary transactions. In this report, so what we do as staff is we analyze for year-end performance. So we do have an attachment that indicates, you know, positive and negative variances both on the revenue and expense side. We bring forward every year at this time a handful of budget ratifications due to over expenditure of appropriations, and I'll talk about that. We have 4 of them for 24-25. We adjust our current year budget, our 25-26 budget, based on those results. And so the fund balances, the line items in this current budget are trued up based on last year's actions, reserves, and then I mentioned earlier those projects, programs, and carryover grants. Those are trued up based on actual cost. And then in the general fund, we distribute that those additional funds. On the next 2 slides, I want to highlight the budget and fiscal policies that you as city council members in a responsible way have adopted, and those guide the recommendations before you in this report. They guide the budgeting recommendations that are before you in the May and June timeframe. And that includes ensuring that we have a balanced budget, that one-time sources are used to cover one-time uses. And so when we're talking about additional funds from last year, these are one-time sources. We ended the year with approximately $41 million in the general fund, and our recommendations here do include one-time uses. On the policies around our reserves in the general fund, you hear from me very frequently, how are we doing in our budget stabilization reserve? This is our rainy day fund in the event of an emergency, 3 months target. That's a policy that we've had, or 25% of our revenues. The council has adopted and we've allocated toward a pension stabilization reserve or a pension trust fund. By policy, we target that at this point in time of the year. If there are additional funds, contribute about a 1% contribution of our unfunded liability. In the capital projects reserve, our city council has adopted a policy of having a minimum of $5 million, and the goal of that is as we enter into the budget development process to allocate funds out. We are looking at, based on council feedback in the last budget process, revising that, and we'll bring that forward later this upcoming budget development on revising potentially that policy target to include ongoing funds to help maintain our infrastructure on an ongoing basis. Roughly 6 years ago, the council also adopted revisions to our reserve policy and our utility funds. They include an operations and maintenance reserve, very similar to the general fund, 90 days. And in our electric utility, you heard me last night talk about a range of 90 to 180 days just because of the large expenses in that utility. A rate stabilization reserve of 10% of ratepayer revenues is kind of the policy. And in my presentation, I'll talk about each of our utilities and where we stand against some of these metrics. And then an infrastructure reserve, 20% of our average annual CIP contribution. Continuing with the overview, our city finances ended 24-25 in a solid fiscal position. 41.3 million in the general fund, 28.1 due to higher revenues, and I'll talk about those specific line items. And then expenditure savings, $13.2 million. I will highlight those expenditure savings are a bit lower than the last 2 years as we continue to fill vacant positions, that those expenses are actualized within the year. In the other city funds, they in general ended the year within estimated levels. We do have a very detailed attachment 3 attached to the report that summarizes that performance. And then within our enterprise funds, many of our reserves continue to increase. We had a concerted effort with that adoption of those utility fund policies to grow these reserves, and I'll talk about that trend in my report. Shifting gears, I mentioned vacancy savings. I know a very important issue. Our HR department is very busy with a lot of hiring and promotion activity, and so wanted to report out. As of July 1st of this year, at the end of last year, we ended the year with 190 vacancies, roughly 16%. That is up, but partially due to the addition of new positions. And so when you normalize for those new positions, 12.2% in the prior year compared to about 13% in July. So roughly around the same level, and that includes both the actions to hire and as well as we have separations and retirements. And so active recruitment's underway, 123 positions across 55 classification and then 15 as needed classifications. So our HR department is very active with regards to hiring. They are also responsible for classification or compensation studies, and those flow through the Civil Service Commission, and they're underway for 5 classification reviews. And then in the time period since the closeout of the last fiscal year through November, we saw 60 new hires and 45 promotions versus 36 separations. So as you know, if I'm before you in the next year reporting out on hiring, hopefully those numbers are improved. I'll shift gears here to talk about the general fund. So revenues of $362.3 million ended the year roughly 10% above budget. That is a higher variance than typically what we target, and I'll talk about some of the unexpected highlights of that revenue performance. A portion of those revenues are collected for very specific areas, primarily around our planning fee or technology fee. And then the earnings or the interest earnings and investment returns from pension reserves are restricted to stay in those reserves. So when you take that out, that's an additional net of $28.1 million on the revenue side. As far as expenditures ended the year just shy of $320 million, about 4.4% below budget. Some of those savings were assumed in the adopted budget to be carried over. When you net that out, it results in $13.2 million of additional expenditure savings, and so that gets you to that $41.3 million. And I'll talk about how we allocate those dollars out, primarily towards continuing our city focus around our capital projects, our large ticket items, as well as filling our reserve buckets. So drilling in further detail in our general fund, our revenue variance, the big surprise of the year was sales tax performance. I have, our department reports out in our monthly financial report, and I have a slide in a couple slides to talk about that in detail. Outperformed by over $10 million. You'll see that when you compare that to other cities in our county, when you compare that across the state, very unique performance. We meet quarterly with our sales tax consultant. We ask them and drill them in terms of making sure that these are not correct numbers. We've seen other cities have corrections from the state. We want to make sure that this is a true and good number. On the second line item there, SVP, the 5% transfer that our residents affirmed several years ago, outperformance there, $4.3 million. Transient occupancy tax, so around our hotel or activities of visitors into the city, and that includes a shift or an increase that was approved by our voters and phased in over several years, roughly $4 million outperformance. Around our fees for services, so I mentioned some of those restricted fees as well as our park fees and as planning activities and the technology fee that's assessed around our development areas are deposited in the general fund. Those are then collected and allocated to reserves. Interest both from our general portfolio as well as our pension trust. When you combine those two line items, $6 million outperformance. We've had higher interest rate environment. It's taken some time for our low yield investments to mature and reinvested at higher rates, and so that contributed to our higher interest performance. Property tax, $1.4 million, just with our high assessments as well as development activity that continues throughout the city. So that rounds out the large items of revenue outperformance to the tune of that $33 million. So I'll spend some time on this slide and walk through some of the information around our sales tax performance. And in our upper left, just on an annual basis, and this is cash receipts, so a little bit timing differences between the time periods. 28.8% growth year over year for the year, the last quarter of 25, 11.3% growth. When you look at our county-wide averages for the year, it's roughly flat, in fact, down 0.1%. Some of our neighboring cities have seen declines. And then when you look at the statewide average, the last row there, 2% growth in the quarter, a flat year-over-year growth. So our city's performance in sales tax is an anomaly, indicative of strong performance. And I'll talk about where on the right, the chart to the right. The chart to the right shows CPI inflation-adjusted performance of sales tax by category over the last 5 years. The red, the top, I guess, cylinder there, general retail, followed by food product, transportation, and construction. So if you could, if you were to kind of take a ruler to measure those cylinders, roughly the same or close to the same performance in those categories. But our real surprise in our business-to-business category in the area of office equipment, as you know, we've had large both data centers as well as commercial development within the city. And so a lot of the equipment and office equipment that goes into those facilities acquired on a one-time basis hits our sales tax, and so that contributed to that $10 million outperformance. And so we are tracking this as we look at this performance this year. We want to be cautious that some of those one-time large purchases, we're not relying on that from an ongoing basis. So when we come back and revise our forecasts, we will adjust our sales tax revenues and take a look at the ongoing performance. And then bottom left, kind of listing there, so we get some inquiries by the public around our sales tax remitters. I wanted to list it in no particular impact order. We are restricted by state law in providing some sales tax information, but wanted to provide here the large sales tax providers to our city in alphabetical order. Taking a look at our general fund revenue history over a 7-year period, and we chose this period because we wanted to look at the last full year prior to the COVID pandemic, through the pandemic, and then coming out of the pandemic, and see what trends have our revenues and growth trends through that period from pre-COVID to now. Our property tax, 64% growth, just shy of a 10% annual clip. We know that both assessed values from properties turnover as well as our development continues to drive that. We have seen that growth moderate with high cost of housing as well as higher interest rates over reducing the number of sales of those transactions. Sales tax, as you can kind of see the The trend here, 58.5 million in 18-19. When you look at 2 years ago, 61.8. Somewhat flat growth there, and then close to $80 million in 24-25. We did expect growth, but not to that effect. Our transient occupancy tax, you can kind of see the cliff there in 2021, 2.9 million, and we had a roughly 90% drop in the peak of COVID, and we have recovered, at least from a dollar perspective, 27 million, much higher than we've had ever. I want to caveat that with the bullet. We did increase the TOT, or the council through the voters increased that TOT rate from 9.5 to 13.5 over a 3-year period. So that is within that growth. And so when you normalize for that from an activity level, we're actually a little bit under pre-COVID levels. When you take a look at our Silicon Valley Power transfers, that has helped us when we've had declines in revenues, especially around TOT or flat sales tax revenues through some of those difficult budget years. And so over a 7-year track record there, roughly 83% growth. So those are the 4 categories I just wanted to highlight from a historical trend perspective in the general fund. On the expense side, expenditures savings of 4.4%, almost $15 million. Salary and benefit savings under 3% here, $6.4 million. So when we talk about what's our target expense or revenue savings, we're usually targeting around the 3% level, and so our salaries and benefits generated just shy of that. And then we had some savings around material, services, supplies, contracts, where some of those expenses were not fully utilized. And so when you look at that all in all, that's the expense picture. So with the allocation in the general fund, 41.3 million available for distribution. As far as the highlights of how staff's recommendation of that distribution, a strong focus here around our capital infrastructure, as we've been before you with the GEO bond Measure I. We're looking here to continue to contribute to our capital budget reserves, $13 million, and that's as we look ahead to the upcoming 2-year CIP, expect to allocate most, if not all, of those funds out to specific needs within the city. Also, on the second bullet there, sub-bullet there, as you can imagine with our campus, the age that it is, a growing employee workforce, as well as ADA changes and requirements within the law, this campus does have significant investments necessary to evaluate. So this allocates roughly $20 million for that, or potential studies for a relocation. And so about $350,000 of that allocation is for very specific studies. And then the third bullet, as our GEO bond gets underway, the bond funds are very restrictive in terms of construction dollars and what they could fund, and we know a lot of our new facilities will require furniture, fixtures, equipment, computers, desks, chairs, and so setting aside $1 million, that's not enough to fund all $400 million of furniture, fixtures, and equipment, but as we have additional funds, we'll continue to have a recommendation to fund those costs that can't be covered by our bond. Third bullet here, additional reserves to our pension trusts, aligning to our council policies, as well as maintaining that 25% in our budget stabilization reserve, as we've had amendments on our Tuesday council meetings, adjusting that. And then the third bullet here, small but very large number of reconciling items, cleanups, and then a small number to address 25-26 funding needs. And so I wanted to walk through on a line-by-line basis that $41.3 million that we talked about, the Civic Center needs and potential relocation, $20.35 million. Capital Project Reserve, $13 million. Pension Trust, $4.6 million. So what that does is increases our unfunded liability coverage within that reserve to an 8% level. When you combine that with our CalPERS funding level of around 65%, our pension plans are funded about the low 70, 73, 74%. Budget stabilization reserve, the 25%, so $1.3 million allocated to maintain that level. We talked about the allocation for our bond projects, furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, $1 million. And then a handful of carryovers within the manager's office or non-departmental or cross-departmental allocation around climate plan, action plan, organizational reviews, employee recognition, and our naming rights grant commitment. And so those are one-time dollars. Those activities continue beyond the fiscal year, so recommendation to carry those over. An allocation here for property maintenance and repairs around our Commerce and Peddlers Plaza to maintain and kind of secure that city facility. And then a number of reconciling items over the next several pages. The last one on this page, working with our fire department, a replacement of some vehicles with excess mutual aid revenues that we receive through our state Cal OES program. So as we get those monies, we allocate them back to the department. On this slide, cleanups and reconciling items around areas where we've committed to restrict funds. And so our fire grants and our police grants, so truing those up around our youth sports park, as well as our capital projects reserve as small projects have savings and are closed out. On this slide, again, the theme, very small adjustments, but do want to highlight them because they are budget amendments within the document here, returning dollars back to their original source. And then on this last slide here, outlining the $41.3 million, just recognizing a true-up of our FEMA reimbursements. We did receive approximately $1.7 million from FEMA to reimburse our COVID expenses, and so this closed out about a 4-year reimbursement process through COVID and after COVID, working with FEMA with those grant reimbursements. On this slide, wanted to update the council where that puts our general fund reserves, our budget stabilization reserve, $81 million. So in our last budget, we were right around that $80 million, so tweaks it up. Capital project reserve, $21.4 million, a modest amount given our very large unfunded liabilities in areas where the general fund's the primary funding source. And then our pension stabilization reserve, $42.1 million. This is the general fund section. When you look at all other funds, it's close to $60 million. So on the next two slides, I wanted to highlight, I know there's a lot of numbers, but the takeaway here within each of our city enterprises against our city council adopted goals, where do we stand? And so in the area of water, want to highlight the growth over the last 6 years here within, since those policies were adopted, a growth, over 100% growth in the water area. In the sewer area where we had very low reserves when we had those policies, growing those reserves close to $28 million. And on the far right column, meeting those council goals in green and where they're slightly short and more work has to be done, highlighted in red there. Around our recycled water infrastructure there, that utility is unique because a lot of the capital infrastructure for that system is paid for through our South Bay Water Recycling Partnership with our treatment plant. Electric utility, I know we talked a little bit about this last night. So with the closeout of last year and including projections for 25-26, the numbers there meeting our goals. And then the solid waste fund there, slightly below our goals, but tremendous growth over that 6-year period. So over the last 6 years, when the council, in a very responsible way, adopted those reserve policies, as an organization continued to grow and put away dollars toward our reserves for very necessary rainy day funds or rate stabilization reserves. So as far as next steps, our budget team has shifted gears to update our 10-year financial forecast. Typically, we complete that in the February timeframe, so in this case, February 26th. And then we lead into the budget development process, study sessions around changes to our municipal fee schedule, April 26, and then typically a series of 3 study sessions and a public hearing around our 2-year capital budget planned in May and June. And so the action before you ties into those processes by allocating those dollars to our budget this year and then planning for those allocations in those proposed budgets. So our recommended adjustments, just in summary, attachment 1 highlighting 4 appropriations where the budget actuals exceeded the appropriations, 2.7 in the water utility fund based on higher water purchases. That is offset by higher revenue, so that is a net effect, neutral effect to the fund. 0.2 million in the sewer fund due to higher budget than budgeted maintenance costs. Sometimes we have unexpected repairs in our sewer system, so that ended the year slightly over the budget. And then $4,000 across the 2 different operating grants, sometimes difficult to project when some of those grant expenses occur, whether they occur this year or next year. Attachment 2, adjustments to beginning and ending fund balances for all our city funds. General fund adjustments to close out the year and the allocation of the $42.3 million of additional fund balance. Carryover true-up, so in June, we recommend and the council approves an estimated carryover of capital projects. And so when those projects are at least the fiscal year is closed out and those activities continue, we true them up. So we have additional carryovers recommended, grant carryovers, and then donations and reimbursements if they're not spent, also carried over so that our departments have access to those funds within this current year. And so with that, our recommendations, note and file our fiscal year 24-25 budget year-end reports, approve the budget amendments, ratifying the 4 funds that I talked about and detailed in attachment 1 of the reports. Recommendation number 3, and I'll just read the main part of this. I know there's about 5 pages of recommendations here that I talked about in the presentation. Approving the 25-26 budget amendments detailed in multiple pages in attachment 2, includes actions to distribute general fund excess funding as resulting from that closeout of 24-25. I talked about that 41.3 million and detailed below, and those items are recommended and detailed in 3A through 3W. And so with that, that concludes my presentation. Appreciate City Council, your support through the budget process, and just wanted to present that to you and ready to take questions as you have them.
Thank you so much, Ken, for that very long presentation, but I guess when you have a lot of money left over, there's a lot to talk about. All right, start with Councilmember Jane. Questions only?
Yeah, where does business license tax fit into this? I know earlier in the year, we're low on business license tax, and we expect them to roll in later in the year. So did we achieve what we were hoping for with business license tax for the whole year? These numbers look good. Our reserves are up. We have a surplus. Does that affect, last night we talked about with the electric utility, our bond ratings. So I know we're going to go out for infrastructure bonds. Does this pretty positive picture help with our bond ratings? And then often when I look at the budgeted revenue for non-NFL events at the stadium, they seem to be budgeted to be pretty low, and they always come up more than what's expected. And I'm looking at table 1 of the actual report here in our packet, and I see that stadium revenues are put into the rent category. And for the rent category, we had a $6.7 million favorable variance. But then under other revenue, we had a negative 7.3 million variance. And so I kind of wanted to understand what we talk about when we talk about rent, and I'd actually like going forward to have sort of stadium authority numbers, performance rent, be a separate line item, given that it's a big topic of interest for our residents and for me. Then finally, last year, I think we reserved $300,000 for council goals, priorities of the council, and I didn't see that here in this budget. Presumably that was not carried over, or if it was spent, do we need to reallocate some money for council goals? Thank you.
Councilmember Chahal.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director, for the presentation, and glad we have a savings of $41.3 million, which we are happy to allocate. Some questions. There was because of the Education Revenue Augmentation Fund, there is a property tax, 18% of that is being put in the reserve. Can you explain that to me, like where is that 18% is right now? Is it with us or with the county, or what's the value? And what's the cumulative value of that, basically? I had the same question which Councilmember Jain had, like we did get receipts of around $5.8 million from the business license tax. And I think our projections were more than 6 million, give and take. So are we on our goal to collect these business license taxes? Because there was some ramping period we were thinking of that we will ramp it up and we'll find out the exact business license tax would be. So where we are on that front, are we collecting like almost 100% of that right now, or we are lacking somewhere, basically? Pension liability fund, some years back, like council had a detailed study session on unfunded pension liabilities. That was a pretty good session because there is a big chunk of unfunded pension liability for the city. So I would like if you can have that type of a study again for council resident as well as for the employees. That would be good exercise to do. And I'm glad we are adding $4.6 million to the pension fund stabilization fund on that. Expenditure savings of $6.4 million from salary and benefits. Out of that, how much of that 6.4 is basically towards positions which we have not filled, or all of that 6.4 is towards that? Because we might have some funded extra money for contracts and other stuff. So I want to find out that out of the 13.2 million, 6.4 million was for that salary, the breakup of that. Sale tax growth, yeah. So I know earlier too, I asked that question, like what part, if we have that information, what part of this growth, because this is pretty good growth on sale tax, what part of that, if at all we have a bifurcation, was from online sales, if we got any? Was that the major factor, or the 25 major corporations you mentioned, NVIDIA, Levi Stadium, events, what role they are playing in totality, basically? What do you think of the impact of the grants? Like, we have some federal grant, we are dealing with that. What role with those, like we have stopped taking those grants because we don't want to get into, agree to what federal government is asking us to do that. So what role will that play in 2025, 2026? What else? Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. Very quickly, I had made the same note about the business license tax. I guess we all went looking for that. Also, on the unfunded pension liability, I know the idea has been to chip away at it. and I was trying to understand about where we were because I was there in the same presentation. And I know on the Bosca board that we looked at the CalPERS, and they did better this year. And so we've just set aside a certain amount each year, but it does change depending on how those pension funds are doing. And it's interesting to me how the room is empty of public on something that we have a lot of control over, the money, and on things that we may not have as much control over. There's a lot of interest. So you said it very clearly here, but I wondered if there's a good way for us to make the point that this is a one-time surprise revenue so that our residents don't think that we are squirreling away all their funds and not using them. If there's a way to just make the point that this was a surprise one-time larger amount. I don't know if you want to put Christmas lights around it or something, but making the point that this isn't, we cannot plan on this every year. Thank you.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I got the question somewhat resolved as far as hearing from the other question as far as the other revenue. But just looking at the variance, and obviously a small, 1% variance can be a fairly large multi-million-dollar number, right, in our budget. But what concern, looking at these numbers, do you have as far as maybe we're not going to see, the sales tax revenues that we saw this year, or maybe it's something else with, the fines or penalties, or, which concern would you say, hey, we got to really take a look at this and make sure that we don't get too excited about this revenue because it might not be ongoing. So I don't know if one particular bucket is more concerning to you.
Is that it? Okay. All right. I had some questions, just kind of overall. So in 23-24, we ended up with $17.5 million in additional funds at the end of the term. And now we have, in this year, $41.3 million in additional funds. So I'm wondering, how are we forecasting for the budget? Because when you look at sales tax, the forecast was very far off. And I understand, the economy is still strong with sales tax, but we're, and I know it's all in our favor, and that's good, but, when we're allowed just a certain amount of money for our city council goals, each budget year, and then you end up with this 40 million, and then the city manager gives a recommendation of how it's supposed to be spent at the end of the year. I mean, we could have taken that money and used it for some of our city council priorities. So that's why I'm asking this, of how are we forecasting these things? Transient occupancy tax, TOT, we knew that there were going to be 2 rate increases this year, but yet we were very far off, like almost 18% off on our projections on that. Interest earnings, I think our budget was actually lower than the year before, and then we came out with twice as much interest earnings than the previous year. So we're very far off on that. And the SVP transfer, I mean, we know that there's a lot of income coming in from SVP. And so we were like almost 13% off on that. And I think someone else asked the question about the staffing. Are we still putting in for full salary and benefits for positions we know we're not going to fill? So at the end of the time, we have 41 million left. And that seems like a huge amount between forecast and actual. And some of those things you can see that they're coming, and others are maybe a surprise, but not this big of a surprise. So my question is, why is that happening? And can we be more accurate on our forecasting so that the council can actually, we can start digging into some of our priorities? That's what I'd like to see. So I would like to hear about that. And then this 20 million set aside for the city hall relocation, I think it's absolutely premature to set aside that amount of money for something that we haven't even engaged the public on yet. So I'm completely against setting aside something like that without going through a full public process. So I would like to see that 20 million either go into our reserves or one part of our reserves, but it makes it look like we've made decisions before we have made any decisions. And I think the perception is pretty bad on that. So those are my comments. Councilmember Park.
Yeah, I mean, keying off that last point, like the only call that I received was on the 20 million funds. And I think that this is, again, premature to allocate. I know that we have to have funds available if we want to rush on a deal or rush on a commitment, but at the same time, we have discussions with lots of groups, lots of public groups that don't know anything about what's happening. And I feel that we should have a little bit more public outreach before we commit anything. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Jane. Is that from before or new?
It's new.
All right.
So I serve on the VTA board, and we're struggling with being able to fund the $12.7 billion BART expansion to Santa Clara. You can see there's digging already out there at our train station. But one of the big issues has been that they use UCLA Anderson to predict their sales tax. And you can see here that the county-wide sales tax is negative 1%, whereas Santa Clara is, 20% to the positive, 28% to the positive. That is really anomalous for what UCLA is saying in terms of sales tax growth. And VTA is struggling. We're going to have to, we get Measure A and Measure B money to fund the BART extension, and we're having to revise our sales tax numbers down, our revenues that we're expecting from Measure A and B because of the UCLA predictions. So I don't exactly understand why Santa Clara is, widely different from what UCLA is saying and what the county is saying, but I'll take the money.
All right, that's it for the questions, but I'm wondering, do you want us to go to the public first? Or are you ready?
I could start but.
Should go to the public first? Okay, let's go to the public and give you a little bit extra time, although you're probably prepared. I don't see anyone here in the chambers. All right. Mary, go ahead, Mary. Unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself, Mary. Hello? Hello? There you go. Okay, there you go. Oh, that was loud. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, City Manager Grogan. I'm speaking on Agenda Item 3B and 2 budget actions that quietly move the city toward major decisions about City Hall and downtown without clear council policy direction. The proposed $20.35 million transfer for a Civic Center campus future needs and relocation project is a major commitment. Yet the agenda does not disclose which sites are being considered, what criteria is being used, or how this aligns with the adopted downtown master plan and the community's longstanding goal of restoring civic uses to our historic downtown. At the same time, the transfer of $9,540 in downtown master plan savings into the land sale reserve, while small in dollars, is large in meaning. It signals preparation for selling city-owned land without a public discussion about downtown strategy, land values, or public benefit. Taken together, these actions advance transformative land use decisions through budget mechanics instead of transparent policy discussion. We have seen this move before. Downtown was hyped once long ago. Promises were made. Then the civic heart of the city was removed, and Santa Clara paid for it for decades. This community remembers, and we will not allow it to happen again. Relocating City Hall is not a facilities choice. It is a land use, economic development, and identity decision. I urge the council to pause, require a public presentation of alternatives, including downtown, and engage the community before committing further funds or setting land sale pathways. Downtown deserves better. Downtown folks deserve better. Also, is Linda Johnston on the line? She is ceding her time to me.
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Are we okay with that? Yeah, go ahead. 2 more minutes. Go ahead, please.
I cannot help think that $20.35 million would go a long way in the downtown infrastructure. And if truth be told, instead of spending money on finding solutions for City Hall and are moving it to other locations, you could kill 2 problems with 1 stone. Sell the Civic Center land and rebuild City Hall in the downtown. It would not only jumpstart the downtown, and you would have a wonderful new Civic Center that will last you 60 or 70 years. That's it. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope you understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan, go ahead, Dan.
Hi, Madam Mayor, Council, staff. Reclaiming our downtown is concerned about how the city plans to pay for the new Agnew Civic Center beyond the increase of the $20.4 million. After asking citizens for a $400 million bond, future bonds are not an option. Therefore, the new Civic Center might have to be paid by selling city lands, specifically Civic Center lands. These Civic Center lands owe their existence to a historical betrayal. In 1957 through 59, millions in federal and local dollars were secured under the promise of restoring downtown Santa Clara. Instead, those funds were diverted to build the current Civic Center and the City Hall you're sitting in. By 1964, the money meant to save Santa Clara's downtown was used to demolish it. Our downtown's destruction was the down payment for our current Civic Center. It is therefore appropriate that some Civic Center acreage be used as leverage to return the complete 10-block downtown plan. Going forward, our group and other teams will be requesting city management transparency on how these citizen-owned Civic Center lands are going to be sold off for what this plan to put City Hall at the Agnews Hospital site will be. We will also be laser focused on what acreage is being set aside to aid in the full return of downtown Santa Clara. We are asking for council and staff's help to ensure that the future of our lands finally serves to bring this destination point back to Santa Clara. It was a priority in the beginning of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Do we have anyone else that would like to speak on this? All right, I don't see anyone, so Ken, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, for the questions. So I'll just go line by line, and if I miss something, please feel free to remind me.
Thank you.
So there were a couple questions around our business license tax, and I want to talk about the trending of that. And Councilmember Jane, you're right. When we did a transition to the new tax model, it did take some time to implement a new a revised system and then roll out education around that new tax rate. And so our collections in 24-25 were 5.8 million, just shy of our budget of 6 million. This current fiscal year, we're projected at about $6.2 million. I want to note that after we had the rollout of that new business tax to our businesses, we then also initiated with council approval as part of the contract our business license vendor to do audits, random audits, as well as audits of our large corporations. And so that does factor in terms of today's collection. We are projected to hit that 6.2, slightly above the 5.8 that we had last year. There was a question around our bond ratings, and I talked about that a little bit yesterday, and very timely for tonight's action. And the answer is yes. When we, as a city, as a city council, adopts strong policies around our reserves, when we have actual balances that meet those policies, when they look at our revenue growth and our revenue history through difficult times such as COVID, as well as the good years, they want to look at trends. They want to make sure that our reserves are growing, have adequate reserves in general. And so our general fund, our city general bond rating is AA+. Just shy of that AAA mark. We do have, I think it was, might have been mentioned earlier, rating presentations for Measure I First Tranche this coming Friday, and our goal there is to get a AAA rating. And so reports like this, where we do exceed revenues against our projections and grow our reserves, are very important for how our rating agencies look at our credit. And that in turn, as we have high credit, reduces the interest costs to our residents, as that is a property tax-based debt service. The comment on non-NFL events revenues, we work very closely with our stadium manager through the Stadium Authority budget process. We have a very short but quick Q&A sessions with them. Question, when they arrive at their stadium non-NFL event budget, what is that comprised of? Which ticketed events, what private parties? And a lot of times at that point in time when that budget's developed, there are a lot of prospective events that are potential, but they haven't signed the contract. So working with our stadium manager, they come up with that estimate. And as a finance person on those revenues, always good news to end the year better than we've projected. There were a couple questions around stadium revenues and rents, and there was a comment in there where it was favorable by $6.7 million and unfavorable by $7.3. Part of that was our performance rent revenues, and when we get those transactions in our accounting department, sometimes whoever is booking those will apply it to certain categories, and in this case, we didn't catch before the books closed that misallocation. But on a net level basis, I have been public before the board through that settlement negotiations, the $20 million that came out of resolving that, and some of those performance revenues and excess revenues are within the numbers in your report today. There was a question around city council goals, and a couple, I know Mayor, you had kind of the comments around funding our city council goals. And so I just want to remind that the process for the last fiscal year, the last budget that the council approved, we went away from the very specific $250,000 or $300,000 and included slides where we're trying to fund, as funding allows, as many of those priorities and goals that we can. And in the last budget process, that number was well north of $300,000 or $250,000. Cognizant that there are many unfunded needs, many unfunded priorities out that were expressed by the council members, by the public. Our process and our goal really is, as we have additional funds, we allocate those to reserves through the budget process, our 2-year capital, 2-year operating, and including in off cycles. We do make recommendations against those priorities. You may recall the last CIP study session, we had allocations allocated to like the Rainbow Crosswalk, and we've had allocations toward different studies and needs based on our city council and our public priorities. And so that process, as we look ahead to the budget process, council priorities aren't limited to $300,000. The funds that you as a council member approve through items as today, as well as our future budget items, are all policy decisions. And so the use of funds towards council priorities, towards areas where staff's making recommendations, are not limited to a very specific number there, but allowable for allocation through that budget process, and that is our recommendation. Councilmember Chahal had a question around an ERAF reserve, and just to educate those at home or those that follow this, we receive guidance from our county with regards to our property tax projections. We also consult with a firm that helps us analyze that property tax data and comes up with future projections. There is a state challenge against the calculation of excess revenues for this educational fund. Our county guidance has been to allocate those dollars to a reserve, 18%. Right now, that balance sits at $7.9 million. And we continue to track that on a quarterly basis. What's the status of that litigation? And if it were to the county's favor, potentially some of those dollars could be released. We are in possession of those dollars, but the county does advise against allocating those funds, so we appropriately have set those up in a reserve.
So my follow-up question on that, does whatever revenue we have in our budget for 24, 25, does that 7.9 included in that, or that's a separate line item in some separate reserve?
It is a reserve in our general fund budget. So
okay, so it's not included in the $90 million?
It is a general fund reserve. I do not highlight it just because it has a specific restricted use. And so when we look ahead, for example, in 25-26, we ask the county, what is your guidance on how much we should allocate to that reserve? So that 7.9 number will change. Sometimes the county says, here's what's at risk, you can release some. Sometimes they say, hey, take this amount and grow it. So that, as we continue with the budget process, if that continues to be an outstanding item, we'll adjust that number based on our county guidance.
No, my question is, our $90 million revenue from the property tax is close to 90, I think, right? Does that number, 7.9, included in that or not?
That is included in that. Apologies for.
Okay, that's included.
Appreciate the clarification.
It's separately reserved in a separate. Okay, thanks.
There were a couple questions around our unfunded pension liability. Appreciate the feedback on the study sessions. We do consult with an actuarial firm that takes a look at a 20-year horizon. We've had them here before the public numerous times in prior years. I think we stopped that after COVID occurred, and so we can take a look at bringing that back. Typically happens in an operating budget year, but we'll talk to our consultant. As far as where we sit, I mentioned the roughly 65% funded in CalPERS. They did do better than their discount rate target. So this fall, we've received some new numbers. And so that will hopefully continue to improve slowly as they outperform with the council's discipline on our pension trusts. That's funded around a 73% level, so not fully funded, but trending in the right direction. There were a couple questions around our salary and benefits and how we budget and the $6.4 million. And so from a budgeting practice, from a long-term planning perspective, we have positions budgeted, we allocate dollars to it, and we know that within the organization there's always some level of churn, people leaving, people coming. And so there is an expectation that we're going to have some savings at the end of the year. And in fact, those budgetary savings were higher in the last couple of years with very large, higher vacancy factors. And that was based on the hiring trends within the region, within the industry, and coming out of COVID. I want to remind that the council policy in terms of funding our capital reserves, our capital dollars, and filling our reserve buckets is reliant on ending the year with savings. And so while we do budget primarily full positions and we have savings, in this case ending the year at roughly 3%, that is our target. Our 3% target savings is our goal when it comes to expenditure savings. And then in this report every year, we come forward to filling our reserves, our pension trusts, and our budget stabilization and our capital reserve. So we are dependent on those savings on a go-forward basis. There were some questions around sales tax and the growth, and I want to hit on both Councilmember Chahal, your question, Mayor, your question on how we forecast. And when we do have an outperformance, for example, sales tax in this case, it is something we track. When we get sales tax dollars, once they're posted from the state, our budget team, on that day they're released, are taking a look at what did we receive, how did we do, did we grow, did we not. As far as the budget process, why are we so far off with some of these numbers? And so if you go back to the slide around the budget development calendar, we're taking, sometimes there's an 18-month lag between the final year-end performance and when some of these estimates were developed. And so right now, for example, in the December timeframe, we're looking at estimates for the 26-27 budget, and when we end that year, there's going to be an 18-month process. Now, that's not to say we're not looking at these numbers. We are looking at these numbers. We do report outperformance in our monthly financial report. Mayor, to your point, in terms of ending the year with large variances, we can look at making adjustments throughout the year that will, as we know information, provide access to those funds. That's not something we've done as an organization in the past, but that typically would result in terms of adjustments. As we know sales tax, for example, is growing, we can offer that and put that as a budget amendment potentially for the upcoming budget process. But want to highlight at least that time frame when we estimate to when we end the year, 18 months, and in the past we haven't come forward on a monthly basis to adjust those revenues as we occur. Now, generally speaking, the outperformance, as a finance director, that's probably the hardest job is you want to end the year in the black, but if you have too much, I fully understand there's many needs that the council and the residents have that those funds could be allocated for. And so in the case of TOT, in the case of our interest earnings or sales tax, and that 18-month performance, that 18 months ago, we were recovering from COVID. We did not know the full extent of that recovery, and in this case, we did better in the area of TOT. We've done better in the area of sales tax with our high-tech industry that we've had, and you see that AI-related industries are doing well, and so those are trends that we're going to look at as we revise our upcoming forecast this February. Fully expect that some of these outperformance in this report will translate into portions of that, but again, Councilmember Gonzalez asked what are areas of concern, and appreciate that opening. As a finance person, always have caution, even in good news, that some of this, like Santa Clara did really well in terms of sales tax, but when you look at our state and our county, flat to negative, some of our neighboring cities are struggling with how we're doing from the impact of the economy, tariffs, and that impact on consumer confidence. And so those are cautionary areas that, if it weren't for very specific industry and business transactions that are occurring, we might likely be in a similar boat with our neighbors. So we are unique as a city as far as that 28% outperformance. I'm going to bounce around here. There was a question around federal grants. That's something we're tracking very closely with our attorney's office. Understand that there are a lot of groups and services that are provided by those grants. In this report, this is a look at the prior year, so this does not factor in kind of impacts from those grants. So that's something that as a staff with our city manager's office, with our attorney's office, and meeting with the departments that deliver those services to our community, we're looking to understand that impact, follow guidance from legal, and then come up with contingency plans. We may be back before you in a different report with a summary of some of those impacts, potentially recommending general fund dollars that might backfill some of those services, but not in this report because this is a backward-looking report, but very much on our forefront as the legal climate and environment changes. Glenn's very good at informing us and thus working with our departments on those impacts. Councilmember Hardy, with our residents, I did mention that these are one-time revenues and expenses that resulted at the end of the year. I know by policy, we take that and allocate it to reserves. And as a finance director, yeah, it is a surprise. It is kind of an embarrassment of riches to come up and say, hey, we have, $40 million on a $360 million budget. Now, explain that there's timing and there's information we provide to the public through our monthly financial report. But definitely, as recommended in this, it's an allocation of one-time dollars, and so appreciate the ability to reiterate that to the public. Councilmember Gonzalez, just on the concerns, I would say that whenever you have a surprise like sales tax and it's 30%, and you look at our neighbors or up and down the state don't have that, my first instinct is to question, is that a correct number? And so we've worked very closely talking to multiple contacts at the state level, working with our consultant to confirm that. Then the next area of concern when you get a number like that is how much of that can this organization depend on from an ongoing basis? That's something we continue to work through. My concern is that, while this is a positive report, there are many, many unfunded needs to our city, our services, our infrastructure. And so as your finance director, in an iterative way, recommending actions to you from a fiscal perspective to set aside dollars, to allocate dollars, and come up with a way, and sometimes very difficult decisions made by the board and with the residents to change revenues in order to address some of those unmet needs. And so my concern, but with optimism from a lot of the trends, is how do we meet some of those needs, $600 million plus from infrastructure, from a structural way, coming up with a way to fund that on an ongoing level. That's going to take considerable work as an organization. Mayor, on the topic of the revenue performance, I touched on sales tax, touched on priorities, interest earnings. I will say that it takes a while to go from a interest rate environment of close to zero to one of like 4.5%. And so as those investments mature, and our outside financial advisor makes recommendations in terms of our investments, sometimes, and in our last year, there's either unrealized or realized gains or losses that result, that they look at, hey, if we have an investment earning a lower interest rate, would it be advantageous to reinvest that at a higher rate but realize some of those losses? And so some of the variance between last year and this year is that we had some realized losses in 2 years ago, and so working with our investment advisor wanted to really understand and minimize some of those swings within our budget and some of those dollars. And so that outperformance is one, based on a conservative estimate, and two, working with our investment advisor to minimize some of those unrealized, or realizing some of those unrealized losses.
I had the question on that because you budgeted below the prior year's interest. And despite the, rising interest rates, I wanted to know why you budgeted less than the prior year. And we ended up with double that.
Yeah, so
that just caught my eye.
Yeah, no, appreciate that detail, and I know that when we look ahead, that's something we're going to continue to look at. And unfortunately, the interest environment's swinging, so that puts some pressure. But you're right, when we have a changing interest rate environment, when our advisor or consultant has realized losses or gains, that can swing it, and that's why we've attempted to minimize that this last fiscal year. I don't remember or recall offhand 18 months ago the exact details that went into that interest number, but just be assured that we are very cautious of those numbers, and we'll bring forward hopefully closer projections in the future on that. Let's see, we talked about salary and benefit savings. So there were a couple comments on the $20 million for the new city hall. I I'll turn it to Javon, but I do want to mention in here that I did talk about needs here. I understand that there is still a long process in terms of that will require public outreach, and this is an initial funding recommendation. Of course, the council at your will can make amendments if needed, but I'll turn it over to the city manager to expound on that.
Sure. Thank you, Ken and Council. And to a number of questions from the City Council as well as from the public. I think first it's important to recognize that the recommendation to establish a reserve fund for, as it's titled here, Public Building Capital Fund, Civic Center Campus Future Needs / Relocation, is a recognition that we as an organization really need to start setting aside funds for the Civic Center campus, irrespective of a future location or improvements here, right? One of the things we know is that our general fund capital reserve, less than 2 years ago, was at $5 million. We thankfully, because of some of our one-time surpluses, have been able to build that up to about $10 million. But over the last several months, we've sat in, Ken, I can't count how many capital budget meetings where we've received over hundreds of millions of dollars worth of requests and over $20 million of requests just to be spent in the next 2 years. And so certainly the council is aware that the council funded a potential City Hall relocation study for downtown. There is literally right now a budgetary proposal that is needed to spend over $5 million on the HVAC system here in our current Civic Center. We have water intrusion issues. We have rodent issues. We are frankly out of space. I toured the Civic Center literally with some of our HR staff this week, looking for space for employees that will start in January. And so we are at a point where I think we all know that this facility needs significant work. There are no funds in Measure I for it. And so the recommendation is irrespective of location, irrespective of options that we are looking at, and will certainly bring to the City Council and the public a full and transparent discussion. And no decisions have been made, and I think any decisions are many, many months away. But this is a recognition of there is one-time funds available and a recognition to set those aside. And frankly, what is a common practice that cities do to set up a fund when you have one-time money to set in it for City Hall. And many cities have done that 20 years ago, and when it's time, they actually find themselves with hundreds of millions of dollars in a fund where they're not asking the public to bond for a civic center, which, as we know when we did our polling, is sometimes a significant hurdle. So that's all the recommendation is really to set aside funds in an account. It does not dedicate spending for a particular location. It literally just says that we are setting aside these funds, recognizing that it is a significant issue amongst our employees. It's an issue for the public, and we have significant deferred maintenance here. We are putting off literally millions of dollars of improvements that are needed because we need to determine the right path forward. And I know you walk around City Hall and see some of the Band-Aids that we have going on. And it's an employee morale issue, I think, as we all know. So with that, the recommendation is certainly irrespective of location, and we will have a full and transparent conversation around any expenditure of these funds. And it is literally just putting them in an account saying, let's reserve some of this money for a very needed improvement.
I think there were two other revenue questions I want to respond to. I didn't want to miss. Councilmember Chahal asked about internet sales tax, I believe. And so we did see some growth around our internet sales tax, a 12% growth in the year. That internet sales tax, the way it's distributed is to the county, and then they pool it and then distribute it based on your actual sales tax. And so as our sales tax base grows, our county pool grows, and so that's why that's grown. In general, internet activity is roughly flat. The conversation of point of sale versus destination and where you charge sales tax is one that's ongoing at the state legislative level. There's either winners or losers if you change it, and so But our pool did grow roughly 12% as a result of that base change. And then Councilmember Jane pointed out UCLA's Anderson School of Economics. We do consult with UCLA's Anderson School. They do provide a more macro view of the economy, and then we do work with a very specific sales tax consultant that audits, that reviews those receipts, and does projections from a forward-going basis. And as I've said earlier, the performance of 28% sales tax growth is an outlier. It's one that I can tell you nowhere else in the state has seen that kind of growth for a city our size. And so while good news, also want to be cautious that we're looking at that at a forecast level and then determining what's a reasonable number to kind of forecast off of. But from a UCLA standpoint, a macro perspective, and then we use other consultants from a micro perspective. I think I answered all the questions. If I missed any, please do remind me.
I think we have a couple more lights on, Ken, so you want to just hold there for a moment. Councilmember Hardy.
Just to make certain for the public that we're really clear, this 3A, which is said increase the transfer to the public buildings capital fund, that does not tie us to any plan at all. It does not tie us to any specific site. It is this one-time funds that we can put aside because we know that we have needs for City Hall, and even just knowing $5 million to fix things that are here. So I think that's really important that our public understand this does not tie us to any specific plan. It is just funds that we know we're going to need. And to me, I think it's the responsible thing to do. Thank you.
Councilmember Jane.
So one of the things that presents an issue, and the city manager mentioned this last week, with the sewer conveyance fee. And that is that if you have a specific area plan, the first developer there has to pay for all the infrastructure. And you were running into this problem at the downtown where there's lots of infrastructure that has to be paid for. And it seems to me that there should be a mechanism for the city to float the infrastructure build out so that when developers come, I believe my understanding of it is that when you have a specific area plan, the first developer pays for all the infrastructure upgrades, which is a huge burden and maybe preventing development in the city. And then future developers pay back that infrastructure bill. And that seems to be a huge impediment to get development started at places like downtown or Patrick Henry. So is there a mechanism for the city to use some of these excess funds to float? I know it's risky, but there's infrastructure that then will definitely be used by somebody in the future. So that was one of my concerns there. And yeah, thank you.
I have a question, Ken. We used to have a real estate property account. Do we still have that, or is it renamed something else? Or what is that account, and what's the balance in that account?
Sure, if I may answer. So we do have a land sale reserve in the general fund. In fact, as part of the ISC action last week, I believe it was, we returned roughly $8 million to that. So there is about $20 million in that reserve by policy set aside for land purchases in that reserve account. And then Councilmember Jane, just on the topic of the conveyance fees, and I think the way I'd answer this is, broadly speaking, in general, for any impact fees, we have various impact fees in our city. We have traffic, parks, affordable housing, sewer, and so very specific studies. There are laws around how those dollars are governed and reported out, and a time frame for which they can be spent, obviously with timing differences of when developers pay them to when some of those improvements are required either by the developer themselves or at a future dates. Inflation, CPI, a lot of things occur, and so there is this difference, and so that is an issue. Now the allocation of dollars to kind of bridge that, there are, depending on what type of infrastructure it is, various eligible sources. So in the sewer situation, if there were a connection that were underfunded, looking at who benefits, from a more reliable structure. And in that case, potentially sewer ratepayers could fund that. But you're right in general that there is that timing difference, and I know the city manager wants to elaborate a little bit there.
Sure. I'll just talk specific to downtown. Not that I know the precise answer, but I do think it's important to note that it's not the first developer and that has to pay for all the infrastructure. Typically, it's set up where there's a trigger, right? And for example, if the water main isn't large enough to cover the entire build out of a specific plan, it may not be the first developer because maybe they're only putting in 500 units and the current water main is big enough for those 500. And so the water main may need to be upsized when it tips 2,000 units. So it's not always the first developer, number one. Number two, specific to downtown, I haven't heard, and I'm not sure that the reason why downtown development hasn't kicked off is because of infrastructure. In fact, council will remember that there was a proposal just before the downtown specific plan was approved to bring a significant housing development to downtown that would have been a catalytic development. Now, there were certain challenges with that development, and ultimately it didn't proceed, and the developer backed out because I think they thought that it became clear that they could not make the changes, or they would not make the changes to obtain the entitlement. But that project was not hampered because of infrastructure or needed investment. And so I know that there's a lot of work and additional studies that are planned for downtown. I think looking into, is there an infrastructure need that the city can front load is a reasonable question and something that could be added. But I don't know now that we can conclude that the issue with downtown is an infrastructure for sewer, water, electricity, or some other service. In addition, I know that the city staff is looking at what incentives can the city provide to support development downtown, and that may be waivers of fees, that may be fee holidays, or the first number of units in get X amount of discount. And so those things are being looked at and will continue to be looked at. But you're absolutely right. For some specific areas, some cities say, you know what, we are going to undertake the infrastructure that's needed for this area to accelerate development. Again, I don't know that that's the downtown issue, nor do I think that's the issue in Patrick Henry. Where we are experiencing some challenges literally right now with development projects are projects that are really on the fringe. We have a housing proposal that needs a substantial water upsizing of over a mile. And that is a very costly endeavor for that developer. And they just happen to be located on the city border next to San Jose, where our water capacity is not sufficient to serve their development. And what we talked about in the meeting last week is that we have a sewer conveyance fee that will pay for those. We do not have the same fee structure on water. And so we have that challenge with that particular development.
Councilmember Park.
Yeah, I mean, I've got another question. It's a completely different thing. It has the word sewer in it, but it's a completely different thing. And we talked about sewer conveyance fees, and we talked about building out new infrastructure. And the question I had was about the sewer laterals, and that's not, we can't use these monies for maintenance. We can't use those funds, so it has to come from someplace else. But when I look at all the funds and reserves here, if we were, and it doesn't sound like we have a lot of push to support sewer lateral services, but if we did, where would those services be, and how would we collect, or how could we collect those funds? I mean, feel free to tell me this is not.
No. Yeah. Very straightforward answer. Our sewer operates as an enterprise funds, and so typically those funds would not come from the general fund. And so if the city did change who was responsible for a certain portion of the sewer lateral, and that burden fell, for example, to the city, if now it's borne by homeowners, there would need to be a funding mechanism for that, and there are various options for that, as well as, there are pros and cons of any major policy decision that would need to be vetted. But typically, a city would not bear the general fund, have that be a general fund expense. And it's worth noting that we have several $100 million of unfunded needs in the general fund. You may recall when we went forward with Measure I, we knew that we had the initial proposal was for $600 million, Measure I is only $400 million, and the study that $600 million was based off of, I believe that was a 2018 study. And so if we inflate the numbers and if we add things that now that we sort of call the known unknowns, things that we know need to be improved, but they're not in the current study. We estimate that at that time there was over $1 billion of deferred maintenance. And so typically cities would not typically add enterprise need onto that.
Councilmember Jane?
I'd forgotten my second question earlier, but now I remember it. So to the city manager's point, socking away money for a city hall makes perfect sense. Sunnyvale's new LEED Platinum City Hall was $245 million. They didn't go out for a bond. They had been socking away money for that. And then their new library was going to be $290 million. They went out for a bond that failed. So socking away money for renovating your city hall or building a new city hall makes perfect sense. Thank you.
I just have to say that the city manager and the city council knows where this $20,350,000 amount, where it surfaced, and it has nothing to do with downtown. So putting this in this budget for public buildings, I'm uncomfortable with that because we all know where this came from and where it's going. So, and we haven't had any public participation in this at all. So I think it's disingenuous to say, all of a sudden this is going to be used for, we're going to look at all kinds of things when we know that wasn't the purpose of this. So I would like it if we're setting aside in a fund like the surplus land reserve or our regular reserves until we've gone through a process. Because if we're moving City Hall, believe me, it's already out there. All this information is already out in the public, but we haven't done it professionally and transparently with our public. I think that setting it aside this way will be for a specific purpose, and I'm really uncomfortable with that. So I'd rather see it in a different reserve fund, so it doesn't look like we've already made up our mind. Of course, Councilmember Park.
And I'd kind of like to see that myself. I mean, I do agree that socking away money, that's the only way that we're going to do this. If we were able to save, or we were able to reserve 1% of general funds of our budget, but just general fund budget for the last 20 years, we wouldn't have lost a lot of the infrastructure. If we had actually spent it, we wouldn't have actually lost a lot of the infrastructure that we've lost in the last couple of years. So I fully believe this. I also know that I've been told this. If you make monies available by a mandate or an ordinance, it can be taken away by a mandate and ordinance. And I've always said, fine, let us put monies away for maintenance of important city infrastructure and let a future council justify why they're taking that money away. I have no problem doing that. In this case, we have a lot of talks. We've been talking for as long as I've been on council. We've talked about downtown. I believe one of my first actions was on the downtown, and here we are 5 years later, and there is no movement on downtown. We've concluded a lot of studies, and there's been no movement on downtown. I don't know what to say about that. I also don't know how, from a single line item, people are getting that this is what's happening. Like, I don't know who's talking. I'm not talking. I'm not telling anyone about what's happening in discussions. I'm just kind of curious, how are people getting information that they're telling us in public input? Thank you.
All right, council, somebody. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll make a motion to note and file, and basically for the staff recommendations that we have here. Yeah, 1, 2, and 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Gonzalez, second by Councilmember Jane. I won't be supporting the motion because I'd like to see that 20 million go into a more general account, not the one where it's intended. But I agree with everything else. Councilmember Park.
Yeah, is there a fund that we could identify for the 20 million? Is there something else, another thing that we could do that I can try to amend this motion?
Sure. 3 options come to mind. You can put it into the regular general fund capital reserve. You can put it in the land sale reserve, or you can retitle. This is setting up a new reserve, so you can retitle that new reserve.
Okay, because my understanding is that 5 affirmative council votes required for revenue actions and the use of unused balances as noted for each item in attachment, right? So, I mean,
I would recommend the land sale reserve because it's for acquiring property.
But, I mean, is there another reserve other than land sale reserve?
So I do think it's worth noting, no matter which of the 3 options, these are all general fund reserves that can be changed by the city council. And so if there is agreement to put it in the land sale reserve, you can put it in the land sale reserve. And then if at some point after a robust process that will occur no matter what on all options, you can make a decision that to pull it out of the land sale reserve and put it somewhere else. It is really essentially designating the funds, saying we would like these funds reserved to be utilized and allocated at a separate date, and you can put that in the general pot, or you can put it in the land sale reserve, or create a new reserve and give it a title.
It's all about perception, and if you put it in the land sale reserve, which is where it belongs, then we can go through our regular, robust public outreach for City Hall, because believe me, there's a lot of interest in this. And it doesn't look like we have made decisions ahead of time. Anyways, that's my opinion.
Okay, well, I mean, I understand this is all the money's going kind of the same place, and we're just putting different labels on things. And as you said, and as everyone knows, future councils can do anything they want. They can reallocate, they can pull it back. It's all the same fund. I don't like the land sale reserve. I do like having something that looks more like Civic Center campus, because that earmarks the money. I mean, it gives an impression of what we want to do with the money more than just land sale reserve. And land sale reserve, I mean, I don't know what that can be used for. I think there are a lot of questionable uses that it can be used for as well. So I would like to make a friendly amendment that we change the 3A from increase to the transfer to public buildings capital fund for a new civic center campus future needs relocation project in amount, but this is just a public buildings capital fund.
That is, I think, the staff recommendation.
Yeah, but I'm saying
So then
it's the public buildings capital fund.
Recommendation, if that's what you're proposing.
But is there something that we can label it so it?
That's what it's labeled.
Through the mayor, can I proffer a suggestion? So 3 options: general fund capital reserve, land sale reserve, or a new reserve that you can call civic center campus project.
That's exactly what that says, so why would we?
Well, that's not exactly what that
It takes
says.
the word relocation out of it.
that's
And would
ridiculous.
designate it for a civic center campus, whether it's here or somewhere else.
Yeah, so I guess I'd request that we change that to a civic center campus. Future needs without relocation is part of the title.
It's basically the same fund, so
I mean, we all know it's the same fund.
accept it if you want 5 votes.
You're saying perception is everything, and here you are complaining.
No, it's the same thought, and you know exactly, okay. All right, city clerk?
The second's fine.
Yeah.
I don't see it. Oh, okay. I thought you were looking at me like vote. Please register your vote. And that passes 5-1. Thank you. And thank you, Ken, for your report. All right, we're going to move on. I think that's it. This meeting's adjourned.